Folks, with Tassos today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the lack of preparation and lack of organisation of the ICE officers when they go and make a raid on, there's a meat packing plant. There's a video that I saw, I think it was in Omaha, somewhere like that, a meat packing plant. But there's multiple other raids, car washes, you name it, where they're able to capture large amounts of, when I say large amounts, 10, 20, 30, that sort of thing, large amounts of illegal aliens, some of whom, in some cases, many of whom, either also have criminal history, criminal charges pending, warrants for their arrest, or indeed they've already had orders to be deported, to leave the United States, but have ignored those court orders. So every reason to capture and arrest these people. They're not only in the United States illegally, but also committed additional crimes. And I'm not talking about spitting on the sidewalk here. So the ICE team goes in and they arrest however many, but then a mob quickly forms. It's amazing how quickly the mob forms. In some cases, I suspect there may be some spontaneity, or an element of it to some degree. But just watching the video of one ICE raid, now they were in and out in less than half an hour, but in that time, I'd say around 20 people had gathered, and all Hispanic, and they were jabbering away in Spanish, and they were throwing rocks at the ICE team, trying to block the roads and just harass and impede the ICE officers generally. Now, for some reason, these people were just able to stand there at the side of the road or nearby, hurling rocks and again impeding the ICE officers and their operation. And there was not that I could see, there was no response from ICE. Now, in some cases, the local law enforcement, who may ordinarily supply support, protection, or cover or whatever, because it might be a blue state, or the city mayor is refusing to cooperate in any way with ICE, or it's a leftist globalist sanctuary city type thing. So there's an element of that there, and I do understand that. But the ICE needs to operate, I would argue, as a self-contained unit with its own protection. I mean, if local law enforcement is there to assist, then fine. But if it's not, or there is some doubt about it, then ICE needs to, I would argue, be fully prepared to deal with flash mob impediments and obstruction, or indeed being outright attacked by the mobs. Now, the ICE should be well aware now that these people are very well organised. The ones who are opposing mass deportation or any deportation, they're very well organised. They can get a mob together very quickly, complete with rocks to throw and all sorts of things like signs to wave, and they can have the media on tap, quick, smart, and they're very organised. So ICE needs to be organised, I would argue, in to an equivalent level of sophistication and detail in their organisation and planning. So I would see the response being that there should always be a team of 6 or 8 ICE officers that are there to grab the rock throwers and arrest them. Maybe more, but at least a decent number. So when the rock throwers assemble, this ICE team, riot police in effect, need to jump out of the van they're in and go out, and they all need to be, they can't be 300-pound officers. These need to be guys who can go and make a chase on foot if they have to, and they need to arrest some of these people and grab them, tase them, or spray them with pepper spray them, whatever. But they need to be able to respond quickly and decisively against these impediments and obstructions, which are again organised. You can get some spontaneity. For example, in one case that I was just looking at, there was one from Mexico is there illegally, and he got grabbed by ICE. but he was able somehow to get off a text to his brother Pedro, and Pedro lives nearby in some communal, bullshit housing thing. So Pedro, who's unemployed, was able to get out there quickly and start throwing rocks. So there's an element of spontaneity there. But grab Pedro; he's illegal as well, for goodness sakes. So respond quickly. Now, what's the precedent for this? Now, the other side, as in the globalists and the leftists, they do have this level of organisation and planning. We on this side need it as well, and we need to be better at it than them. It's as simple as that. So when the COVID protests were on, by the way, the COVID protests were being conducted by people who had committed no crime. They were out there saying, why must my business be shut down? Why am I not allowed to go to work? Why am I having to suffer this confinement and privation? I have not voted for it. I have not agreed to it, and so on. So the COVID demonstrators or protesters, call them what you like, were not illegal, people acting illegally or who had committed crimes. But the globalist governments were quite determined to show these people, we're in charge here, motherfuckers. And so I watched some footage where there were military style units embedded within the police. The police were blockading a road or something like that. And these military style units were there, and you could see the military style structure, the officer in the middle of it. So they would have observers that would be infiltrators were in the crowd, identifying ringleaders, and they would then communicate this to the military units embedded within the police. They were in police uniforms, but they weren't police. These were military dudes, and they were within the police. And they say, okay, the guy wearing the jeans and the hoodie that's red or brown, whatever. They'd identify the ringleaders or the prime movers in the COVID demonstrations. And they identify them, and they'd radio it through or text it or whatever. And then the military unit would move into place. And again, they had police uniforms, so you had to watch it carefully. And then they would dart out of the police lines, you charge into the crowd and grab a couple of the what were allegedly going to be ringleaders and drag them off and arrest them. And they were able to do this with I thought, rather impressive efficiency. And I'm surprised the media didn't cover it in more detail, or in some cases not covering it at all. So I watched this and I spotted the structure of it, and there were multiple units all around the place, around the city and so on, in all the big cities in Australia. And I was watching them do this. But I saw also the same thing operating in Britain. Again, these military units darting out and quickly grabbing people sort of before the crowd had time to react and this type of thing. And they dragged them off and arrested them, or just dragged them off. And that they were pretty rough with them as well. They were thrown to the ground, and burly officers kneeling on top of them and treating them as if they were, resisting arrest when they weren't, this type of thing. So this was very much premeditated act of intimidation, but also to pull out the ringleaders and the agitators. It didn't work in the end in this instance, because it was a very organic sort of type protest, rather than just a bunch of paid agitators that were doing it. And in order to prevent paid agitators from doing the demonstration or the rock throwing, then you need to grab people so you can interrogate them to get other names and so on. So it's a very different scenario. One is a paid agitators in an organised political, terrorism program. The other is spontaneous grassroots people saying, "Why are you locking me up? Why are you doing this? I never voted for this." That type of. So two very different scenarios here. But the ICE people need to be this well organised. Now, on the second front, which is the lower court in the United States that ruled that the President Trump, doesn't have the authority to nationalise the Guard, the National Guard in California, or the California State National Guard, doesn't have the authority to do it. I mean, on my reading of the Constitution, its wording, I would I was very dubious about that lower court ruling. I thought the president did have that authority. That would be my interpretation anyway. But the lower court, an activist judge, obviously operating on leftist Democrat globalist instructions, they always deliver very reliably for what the globalists and the Democrats want. These lower court judges. So the lower court judge does this thing, but this time it was different. Instead of the Trump team being caught flat-footed and floundering for days while they work out what to do, my reading of the situation, at least, is they knew the case was being heard. They knew the lower court judge was a globalist flunky. They knew that that lower court judge would rule in favour of the Democrats. They knew that, so they already had their paperwork and they already were absolutely ready to go. The second that judge, the lower court judge, issued that injunction decision, the Trump team was straight into a superior court judge or an appeal court judge, as I understand it, or a group of an appeal court. And they had their documents filed, ready to go. Bang! Now that's the level of organisation that is going to allow you to win. The legal ground game, the globalists and the activist judge network and the activists generally, their ground game was way far superior to anything that the anti-globalists or the Republicans were doing. But this impressed me how quickly this time they moved, and how they had the paperwork ready to file. I mean, the lower court judge the words had barely left his fucking mouth before appeal documents were being lodged, and that's how it needs to be. That level of response and organisation is what's going to win the ground game, because this legal warfare is a legal ground game, and we just have to be better at it. And in this instance, the Trump team was on top of it, whereas previously, at least, and certainly in the first administration, it seemed every time they got an injunction, they floundered for forever before they crafted a proper response. So there's two things. That ground game, that was a good example there, but the ground game needs to be at least that and better going forward. And ICE needs to take its own protection units with it and grab these rock throwers. Get out there and grab them, spray them, pepper spray them, and at least disable their ability to throw rocks and then do that to a number, and then arrest a number of them. But do it. This is how you're going to win the ground game. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.